Right now.
Okay. And we are live. Hey everybody, Florian Kandler here, co-founder of Ullmann, host of the Startup Milestones podcast and publisher of Startup Report Austria. Welcome you all to this live stream. If you've been part of the first try, you will see that now it will be working. Hey guys, Christoph, Martin, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Fine.
All right, excellent. So guys, we are trying something new here today. The idea of this format is very simple. Everybody's busy in the startup world. You are busy, we are busy, but sharing knowledge is the lifeblood of a startup community. So we thought we all get together for a cup of coffee, have a little coffee break together, 10-15 minutes, talk about one particular startup topic, and we also take your questions, and then we get on with our days. So as you can see, we're all here at our command posts. Martin, Christoph, thanks for taking a coffee break with us today. How are you doing? How is your coffee?
The tea is fine, thanks.
And the water is fine too.
Fantastic, fantastic stuff. All right, so we're going to do this in English, and because there are plenty of non-German speakers in our ecosystem, and we want to be inclusive of them, and we want to allow this knowledge that we shared today to travel across borders, across the whole continent, and maybe even beyond. So for today's session, I have invited two very interesting Austrian founders who both got funding for their startups last year. It's Martin Pansy of Nuki Home Solutions and Christoph Drescher of DealMatrix. And our topic today will be about how to pick the right investor. And we will learn from Martin and Christoph how they selected their investors, what their strategies were. And now, very importantly, if you have a question to Martin or Christoph, post it in the comment section under this live stream at any time. We will be opening up the discussion to you to answer your questions here in a few minutes. So also, if you think this session could be of interest to friends of yours, let them know about this live stream. To do that, simply hit the share button on your screen now. But now let's bring in the stars of the session, really. Let me introduce my two guests briefly. Christoph Drescher is co-founder and CEO of DealMatrix, a software for venture scouting. And DealMatrix is one of several entrepreneurial activities he has done in the past. So he's quite experienced, and his startup is based in Vienna. And Martin Pansy is co-founder and CEO of Nuki Home Solutions, the smart door lock. And he's a serial entrepreneur as well and founder of Up to 11, a company builder for mobile business ideas based in Graz. Great to have you here, guys.
Thanks for the invitation.
All right, guys, I've invited you two because of a particular answer you gave in the Q&A of this year's Startup Report Austria. And there was a question about what do you look for when you picked your investors, apart from the money that they bring, of course. And Martin and Christoph, you both, at the very beginning of your answers, you pointed out, a good fit, social fit. But I want to dive in today in this conversation. What does that exactly mean to you? So Christoph, can you maybe start? You said a good fit. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, of course. So basically, looking for an investor is not that much different than looking for a partner, in my opinion, because you are really looking for the person that goes with you the long way. And building a startup is pretty hard. Basically, you can compare it as well like building a relation. And as we know, also a lot of relations get separated. So you do not want to get separated from your investor. You want to go the way together to be successful. And for that reason, you have to find out, is there a strong relation that can also work in the difficult situations?
Yeah, very good, very good. And Martin, you in particular said social fit. So are there some more aspects that you really look for? What is social fit to you? How can you test it out?
Well, to test it out is probably it starts in early negotiations that you have with your potential investors. And I mean, if there is if you think that there is some sympathy with the people sitting on the other side of the desk, most often this also works out later. Although I have to say that when negotiations really get tough, you shouldn't look at the sympathy because that's when the contracts are made. But after the deal is done, usually the sympathy should come back.
Okay, I think that's a very interesting point because you cannot expect sympathy to be the driving theme during the negotiations. It could happen. Exactly. But maybe it might even be an indication if the investor is too happy while you negotiate that you're not negotiating hard enough. Is that a possibility?
Well, exactly. I mean, if both sides do their job, then there is not much sympathy during the contract. period, but you'll keep it short. And once you're done with it, you take your head up again and start to work together on what you have just agreed on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because, so you have to do that before. So you shouldn't rush the whole process and give yourself time for that. So, Christoph, what is your, or maybe to give our audience a little bit of context, I mean, I picked you two guys not because of your experience as founders, entrepreneurs, and the businesses you've built, but you come from very different angles with this particular startup. So, Martin, you raised 2.2 million euros last year, and you raised it from what I would call strategic investors. And maybe you can briefly say who they are. And Christoph, you raised 250,000 euros last year, so a smaller amount, and I think also more angel type of investors. So very different types of investors, but is it still, when you talk about social or cultural fit, does that go across all kinds of investors? Christoph, what do you think about that?
I would say, especially in the beginning, it's very relevant. Yeah, the further you go, it might get a little bit different because the company has for sure already reached a certain milestone, and you have received maybe a first round investment by angel investors before, and then you go for the VC money. VCs are definitely not that much in the game. If you think about the classical VC, because they are very much data-driven and figure-driven. And of course you can call them and they will help you. But when you think about really having the person next to you, an angel, yeah, he identifies himself with the company. So basically you are the baby with your startup when you kick it off.
Yeah, totally. So Martin, what do you say if you have those strategic or big ticket investors? Can you even build a relationship with them, or are they even interested in that, or is it in the end all a social game anyways, a game between humans?
Well, I would say in our case we're still not at the stage where the tickets are that big, so that we really have investors that are just in for the financial benefit. So in our case, as you already said, it was very much about the strategic fit. It was so Nuki is our first hardware project that we have. We've done something similar previously, and therefore it was quite key for us to bring on board somebody who knows the hardware business. And in our case, this almost ideally played out because we brought our manufacturing partner on board, which just besides of all the know-how that we get out of the hardware business, also has the benefit that, it's the one partner or supplier that you're really dependent on when doing hardware. And if he also has a stake in the company, means that he is also dependent on us to some extent, or at least it shows a quite strong commitment also from the manufacturing partner that he believes in the actual end product beyond what he is doing just the manufacturing. So that was quite key for us. And our second partner is a company that has quite strong roots in the real estate business, which is something where a smart door lock has some strategic fit, and especially when it comes down to sales and business development. And it was something that maybe not at the time when we made the investment, we thought that this can be a benefit in the future. But when I look at our roadmap for 2017, there is already lots we can also do with this new investor, and where they can help us based on their network. So that for us, it was really about first strategic fit. We had an idea where we want to take the business, and then of course social fit needs to be there as well. And if those two work, then it's about the money. And of course, also here, the calculation must be the right one.
Okay, very cool. I mean, totally agree on all the other aspects that need to be there, but I really want to focus in on this social and cultural fit today. And let's get really tactical. What are recommendations you can give people who are out there thinking about raising their first round of funding? They're in contact with some investors. Maybe investors send them some emails saying, yeah, send me your pitch deck, send me more info. So that's not a very warm social interaction. It's more about facts. What are things you can maybe engineer, so to say, some things you can actively do that you get onto that level where you can actually see, is there this fit? Christoph, any tricks that you can share?
Yeah, basically experience on my own. So with our lead investor, it took more than half a year to get from the point of first recognition and discussions to the point to say, yes, okay, I'm your lead investor, I'm going to invest in you, and now we do the money transfer. And this is basically something where you are asking for advice, like mentorship, coaching. Do you have time once a month that we can sit together and I share with you my thoughts and you tell me what you have done in your business? And by that, you build a steady but growing relationship that keeps you on a point where every side can say at any time no, yeah, because it doesn't figure out to work well, or that you go further and at the end you say, okay, like I asked already 1 or 2 months earlier, what do you think today? Wouldn't we take the next step, for example? And this is something that needs time. Yeah, like you're not marrying typically your girl or boy within the first few weeks. Yeah, this is the same procedure.
Okay, Martin, what are things that you did where you said, okay, I really want to test this guy. Will I be able to work through hard times with these persons? Are there some things, I mean, do you go and ride the bikes together? Or how far would you go to really see, is there a fit? Because, one part of our life is business life, but, another big part, of course, is the private life. And they don't go separate. So any things you did around that?
Not special on this financing ground, but in the end, in our case, what really helped is that we already had a supplier relationship with one of our later investors. And as I said, it's our main manufacturing partner. So we had already lots of touch points before where the other side and ourselves needed to prove themselves. So there was already, we had pretty good knowledge about what to expect from the other side. And I think probably one aspect that I would add is you can never know all your potential investors in person, especially when you're at the very beginning of building up your network amongst investors. But you can ask other founders, and if you look up which kind of investments a specific investor has already done, and you ask, okay, how is it? How is social fit over there, more or less? Then I think you get also a pretty good indication, because again, it's like dating, and also and also with dating, you ask, okay, and who knows her, and how is she? Yeah, and that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Okay, cool stuff. So, what are your thoughts on fit? That might sound like, okay, there is a good investor and there is a bad investor, and the good investors are a fit for everybody and the bad ones are not a good fit for everybody. But it depends on what your needs are, what kind of entrepreneur you are, and what you're looking for, how you interact with people. I mean, we're all very different. What are some things that first-time founders should think about themselves first before they are even able to find the matching investor? Shouldn't we do that first? What do you think, Christoph?
That definitely makes sense. I mean, you have to distinguish in the very beginning what is more important for you. And of course, you like to get a lead investor with experience, with an exit, with a great network, with connections, even outside Austria. But maybe in the very beginning, it's also okay that you say, I'm asking family, friends, and the fools, the classical ones. And this money kicks it off that you get your product to a certain point where you can attract especially those other investors. So I would not distinguish that much between good and bad in a very early stage, but of course it's helpful to have a good investor with all the knowledge on board. The earlier you get it, the easier it is, but as we heard already from Martin before, that might take some time, and you also might waste your time, especially from both sides, because this fit doesn't get through. And yeah, our platform can also support on that.
Right. Okay. Very good pitch snuck in there. I like it. But what I thought, or maybe what my experience is that, for instance, if you're a founder who is very vision driven versus a founder who is very numbers driven, let's say, to just pick out two stereotypes, so just two buzzwords here, you might have a fit with totally different angels. I mean, one the vision driven might like to sit down with an investor and just brainstorm about how the future in 5 years might look, and you get great inputs there and you draw a lot of energy from these conversations, while a person who loves his Excel sheets might get frustrated because he can't model that vision into columns and lines in an Excel sheet. But an investor who can really model a business into a few columns and then say, okay, let's set targets, measure them, and see how we operate against them and help him on that front, that might be an investor that's a match for that person. So how would you say, what's your thought, Martin?
I see a little risk here, because in the end, social fit is not so much about your strengths and weaknesses on professional side. So what you just mentioned is, if there is somebody who is vision driven, and you think he is sympathetic with you because he is vision driven, that means that you will soon be surrounded just by investors who are vision driven. And it's, in most of the cases, it's about the ideal mix. And it's quite good if you have more than one investors and from a totally different angle, because the mix is what counts in the end. So for example, within up to 11, we have one investor who is, he's more or less playing the devil's advocate, but in a very good manner, on a very high professional level, which doesn't mean that there is no social fit just because he has a different access to things. So I think it's quite important to don't mix, let's say, social fit with individual strengths and weaknesses.
Very good point. I like that a lot. That's right. You can have completely different approaches, but the social aspect is actually how you interact with that person, and
Exactly.
how you get along, how you manage your interactions, independent of the content of that interaction, so to say. Is that fair?
Yes, that's it.
All right.
I would even say it's the diversity that you get as well on the either investor and or advisory side in your team, because as you should have it in your team, also outside it's relevant.
Absolutely true. Hey guys out there, if you have questions, post them now, because we're gonna wrap this coffee break up. Like we said, we're just gonna have a quick coffee and dive into a topic. So if you have questions, post them now. So summing it up, what would be a recommendations? Maybe let's spin it around and say what are signals, alert signals that could go off? If that happens in an interaction, that might be a signal that there is no fit. Any things that come to mind, maybe from personal experience with potential investors, where you thought, okay, maybe there is no fit, or some things that you can recommend?
The no fit turns out pretty fast when you get the sentence, yeah, I will get back to you soon, and then you never hear something from them. When you call them and you don't get a call back. So all those things happen. Be prepared for that. But I would concentrate much more on the positive effects and start early enough, to build relations, to be at events where you meet potential investors, where you get introduced, and where you get basically what Martin said, this, what do you hear about them? So how do they interact, and is there a potential fit? And the most important thing then is to get introduced and get a warm regard. And then from there, it's the part about not being impatient and driving it too fast, but giving this process the time it needs.
Martin?
Yeah, I think, well, probably what I can only add is that you should be well prepared when you start funding, and well prepared starts with yourself, which means you should know where you as a person would like to go and where you would like to take your company. And then it's your job to bring those people on board who help you the most to get there. And those are maybe investors, and then the job starts to find them, but
True.
not in the first instance.
Very cool. Let me pick a question that came in here from Dejan. Hey Dejan, how is it going? So the question is, comparing it with dating, does it mean you would only speak with one potential investor as long as you're dating with him or her? Or did you have more parallel dates at the same time, comparing them to each other? And that winky smiley. So guys, how promiscuous have you been?
I would not recommend to rely on just one girl. in the end, if she doesn't like you, you'll just wasting time. So better talk to more than one.
I can only say the same. In this regard, it's a little bit different than in the personal relation. Talk to as many as you can, because you will have dropouts, and from there you can pick up those where you have this fit.
Yeah.
And by the way, I mean, no investor can expect that there is some exclusivity. So if he expects exclusivity, then it's something that needs to be stated clearly. But otherwise, I think it's quite standard that there is no exclusivity in early stage talks.
I agree. That's I like it that we found this big difference between fundraising and dating. It's always compared, but there is definitely a big difference in how you should do it parallel and what the expectations are. So there will be no hard feelings on the investor side. Actually, in my experience, you can tease them a little bit if you give them the feeling that there is other stuff going on, and you should actually try to get momentum and have several investors interested at the same time to really be able that you can then compare, because you will never find the perfect investor or everything perfect, but you will have one where this fits better, but maybe the amount is lower and there that, and you can only take the best decision if you have them on the table at the same time. All right, guys, any more questions out there? If so, post them right now. Eva has posted, have you been cash flow positive before you got that funding? Yeah.
No.
You haven't, Martin? No, definitely. Okay.
No, that was one of the main reasons why you look for funding.
Yeah. So in those cases, no. All right, fantastic. So let's wrap up this session, guys. Thank you so much for having coffee with us today and sharing your insights. Very, very cool. Thank you, guys. Cheers to you. And folks out there, thanks for having coffee with us today. If you enjoyed this live stream, we will do more of these in the near future with different founders from different industries and talk about different topics. If you don't want to miss any of those streams or want to know about upcoming guests and send in questions beforehand or even suggest topics and guests, you can find information. I've put a page together. Go to startupmilestones.eu/live. And yes, that concludes our session today. See you again next time. And until then, keep up that startup spirit.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.